5. The Family and Delinquency. The problem of juvenile delinquency appears in a law of central importance, but one unfortunately neglected by commentators as far as any relevance to our society is concerned. The law reads, "If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him and bring him out unto the elders of his city, and unto the gate of his place. And they shall say unto the elders of his city, This our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of his city shall stone him with stones, that he die. So shalt thou put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear." Deuteronomy 21:18-21. The law is clear enough, if only the interpreters were as clear. At this point, we see Talmudic interpretation at its worst. There is long quibbling as to what constitutes a son. It is defined in terms of a beard and pubic hair. For example, quote, "R. Hizda said, If a minor begot a son, the latter does not come within the category of a stubborn and rebellious son. For it is written, If a man have a son, but not if a son, that is, one who has not reached manhood, have a son." End quote. A discussion is also reported as to the age when a boy's sexual activity ceases to be quote-unquote innocent and becomes sinful. The pornographic discussion which follows throws no light on the text, but reflects the legalistic attempts to twist the meaning of words into an alien sense. Like jurists of our day, and like the U.S. Supreme Court, every attempt is made to make the law null and void by limiting the scope of its application. That is, the son was not guilty if he drank expensive wines, because then he obviously could not get too much. So it must refer to cheap Italian wine. Again, if the delinquent has been sexually incapacitated by an accident of birth, then he is obviously not a son, we are told. In analyzing this law, certain things need to be recognized. First, it indicates a limitation in the power of the family. A Roman father had the power of life and death over his children. He could expose them as infants and kill them as youths, and this power appears in many cultures. The parent, as a god, gave life, and as a god, he took it. But as Klein noted, quote, "Chastening was the limit of the parent's own enforcement of their authority," verse 18, end quote. In fact, quote, "The laws upon this point aim not only at the defense, but also at the limitation of parental authority. If anyone's son was unmanageable and refractory, not hearkening to the voice of his parents even when they chastised him, his father and mother were to take him and lead him out to the elders of the town into the gate of the place. The elders are not regarded here as judges in the strict sense of the word, but as magistrates, who had to uphold the parental authority and administer the local police." End quote. In biblical law, all life is under God and His law. Under Roman law, the parent was the source and lord of life. The father could abort the child or kill it after birth. The power to abort and the power to kill go hand in hand, whether in parental or in state hands. When one is claimed, the other is soon claimed also. To restore abortion as a legal right is to restore judicial or parental murder. It is significant that as innocent victims are killed and capital punishment is withheld from their murderers, the same men who plead for the murderer's life also demand the quote-unquote right to abortion. Gary North noticed at a major university campus, the same picketer carrying a sign one day, "Abolish capital punishment," and "Legalize abortion" another day. When this was called to a liberal professor's attention, his answer was, "There is no contradiction involved." He was right. The thesis is, condemn the innocent and free the guilty. Second, the law requires that the family align itself with law and order rather than with a criminal member. Wright held that, quote, "It is highly improbable that parents often appealed to such a law," end quote. The parents are not complaining witnesses in the normal sense, and as a result, they are not required to be executioners as witnesses normally were, Deuteronomy 17:7. It is the quote-unquote men of the city who are here executioners, and hence it is a complaint in a very real sense by the community against a criminal member. It will not do to plead humanitarianism here. In those days in neighboring cultures, the father had the power to kill his children and often did. While the Hebrews had a different standard, neither their law nor their lives moved in terms of modern humanitarianism. If the parents refused to complain against their son, they were then guilty of condonation and/or participation in his crimes. Their role was thus a formal but necessary one. Would the family align itself with justice or stand in terms of blood ties? In view of the strong nature of family loyalties, the parental participation was necessary in order to ensure freedom from feud and also to place the family firmly against its criminal members. A parent refusing to file a complaint in such a case would become a party to the offense and a defender of crime. The principle required was clear-cut. Not blood, but law must govern. Third, biblical law is case law, and this law does not deal simply with sons. It means that if a son, who is beloved of parents and an heir, must be denounced in his crime, how much more so other relatives? A family turning over its son to the law will turn over anyone. Thus, daughters were clearly included. The law said, "There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel," Deuteronomy 23:17. "Do not prostitute thy daughter to cause her to be a whore," Leviticus 19:29. The evidence would indicate that no Hebrew girl could become an incorrigible delinquent and in periods of law and order remain alive. It is significant that the term used in Proverbs for a prostitute is the strange or alien woman, a foreigner. This has two possible interpretations. Possibly, the daughter who became a prostitute was read out of the family and the nation, and was no longer a member of the covenant people but a foreigner. More likely, as the literal reading plainly indicates, the prostitute was a foreign girl. Clearly, then, the intent of this law is that all incorrigible and habitual criminals be executed. If a criminal son is to be executed, how much more so a neighbor or fellow Hebrew who has become an incorrigible criminal? If the family must align itself with the execution of an incorrigibly delinquent son, will it not demand the death of an habitual criminal in the community? That such is the intent of the law appears from its stated purpose. "So shalt thou put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear." The purpose of the law is to eliminate entirely a criminal element from the nation, a professional criminal class. The family is not permitted the evil privilege of saying, "We will stand behind our boy, come what may." The family itself must join the war on crime. Since the law is a plan for the future, that plan clearly means the elimination of crime as any significant factor in godly society. This law has had its effect on American law, in that habitual criminals are still technically liable to life imprisonment after so many convictions. But these laws are a weakened and declining reflection of the biblical law. Originally in the United States, habitual criminals could be executed, and some states still have such legislation on the books. Since the biblical law has no sentence of imprisonment but only restitution, its view of crime is that the act of crime is committed not by a professional criminal but a weaker citizen, who must restore the stolen goods plus at least an equal amount, in order to be restored himself to his citizenship in the community. Biblical law does not recognize a professional criminal element. The potentially habitual criminal is to be executed as soon as he gives plain evidence of this fact. Fourth, at this point, the factor of pity comes into view. The common humanistic view is that such a law is pitiless. The biblical perspective is that it is not, that, in fact, the modern perspective reflects not pity, but misplaced pity. Shall the criminal or the community be pitied? The biblical law demands pity for the offended, not the offender. Pity, in fact, is specifically forbidden as evil in certain cases. Obviously, in the law concerning the delinquent son, pity for the son is forbidden, but in other laws, pity is specifically cited as forbidden. And thou shalt consume all the people which the Lord thy God shall deliver thee. Thine eye shall have no pity upon them, neither shalt thou serve their gods, for that will be a snare unto thee. Deuteronomy 7:16. If thy brother, the son of thy mother, or thy son, or thy daughter, or the wife of thy bosom, or thy friend, which is as thine own soul, entice thee secretly, saying, Let us go and serve other gods which thou hast not known, thou or thy fathers, namely of the gods of the people which are round about you, nigh unto thee, or far off from thee, from the one end of the earth even unto the other end of the earth. Thou shalt not consent unto him, nor hearken unto him. Neither shall thine eye pity him, neither shalt thou spare, neither shalt thou conceal him, but thou shalt surely kill him. Thine hand shall be first upon him to put him to death, and afterwards the hand of all the people. Deuteronomy 13:6-9. But if any man hate his neighbor, and lie in wait for him, and rise up against him, and smite him mortally that he die, and fleeth into one of these cities, then the elders of his city shall send and fetch him thence, and deliver him into the hand of the avenger of blood, that he may die. Thine eye shall not pity him, but thou shalt put away the guilt of innocent blood from Israel, that it may go well with thee. Deuteronomy 19:11-13. And thine eye shall not pity, but life shall go for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Deuteronomy 19:21. When men strive together one with another, and the wife of the one draweth near for to deliver her husband out of the hand of him that smiteth him, and putteth forth her hand and taketh him by the secrets, then thou shalt cut off her hand. Thine eye shall not pity her. Deuteronomy 25:11-12. In Deuteronomy 7:16, pity for the evil inhabitants of Canaan was forbidden. God's pity for them and his patience had lasted for centuries. Now the time for pity was gone. It was a time for judgment and death. In Deuteronomy 13:6-9, pity for the subverter of the faith is forbidden, even when that person is a near and dear relative. The foundations of godly order are at stake, and pity here is an evil. In Deuteronomy 19:11-13, pity for a murderer in a case of premeditated murder is forbidden. No extenuating circumstances can be pleaded against the fact of murder by premeditation. In Deuteronomy 19:21, the general law of justice is stated. The punishment must fit the crime. There must be a comparable restitution or death. Pity cannot be used to set aside justice. In Deuteronomy 25:11-12, no woman in defending her husband who is fighting with another man can attempt to aid her husband by mutilating the other man's sexuality. Such an offense was a particularly fearful one. It is the only instance in biblical law where mutilation is the punishment, and its significance is of central importance. A wife is under God to be a helpmeet to her husband, but only and always under God's law. In a quarrel between two men, she could not take unfair advantage of her husband's assailant. Faith requires staying within the law of God, and a woman can never help her husband lawlessly. If such were permitted, then a man could step aside and let his wife break the law for him with impunity. A lawless love is under the sentence of the law. Joab loved David as none other save Jonathan did, and Joab was often right where David was wrong. But Joab's love was often a lawless love, and he only earned the hatred of his kinsman David and final judgment. In the case of the lawless wife, the fact of mutilation was a grim public warning. A lawless hand or helpmeet was no hand or help at all. Her mutilated arm was a grim reminder to all of the prohibition of lawless love. She was not to be pitied, for pity must also move in terms of law, or it becomes the condemnation of evil. Whether a wife, husband, or son be involved, pity must never become lawless. Fifth, the crime of the delinquent son involves an assault or war on fundamental authority. Of Deuteronomy 21:18, Schroeder wrote, quote, "He disputes the parental, that is, divine authority in disposition and life, and indeed, although it has been held before him, thus with full knowledge and purpose." End quote. Of verse 19 he added, quote, "With the parental, the civil authority is also endangered, and hence the case passes from that to this." End quote. Moreover, as Manley noted, quote, "Seeing that parents stand towards their children as God's representatives, obstinate rebellion is regarded as akin to blasphemy and is condemned to the same punishment." End quote. Sixth, the principle of capital punishment, of which more later, is involved here. Life is created by God, governed by His law, and to be lived only in terms of His law word. All transgression faces ultimate judgment. Capital offenses require the death penalty here and now by civil authorities. Neither the parents nor the state are the creators of life, and therefore they cannot fix the terms of life. In this fact is man's greatest safeguard for freedom. The godly state does indeed deal severely with offenders, but it strictly limits the power of the state at any and all points in terms of the Word of God. The power of parents is similarly limited under godly order. The biblical family never has the despotic powers of the Roman or Chinese family. The parents are at all times limited by the law word of God. Biblical law clearly favors the godly and deals severely with the lawless. As Waller wrote of the law concerning a delinquent son, quote, "Manifestly, this enactment, if carried out, would be a great protection to the country against lawless and abandoned characters, and would rid it of one very large element in the dangerous classes." End quote. Seventh, the formal charges against the son are of especial interest. We have noted the fundamental assault on authority covered by the words stubborn and rebellious. According to Waller, quote, "The Hebrew words became proverbial as the worst form of reproach." End quote. A glutton and a drunkard, compare with Proverbs 23:20-22, where the same two words are found, adds to the picture of a rebellious, antisocial, and incorrigible delinquent. The Talmud, by its reinterpretation of each term, made the law virtually inapplicable to anyone. The law, by its generalization, portrays an incorrigible delinquent whose general conduct confirms his lawless nature. The confirmed character of the son establishes, among other things, this: the delinquent and rebellious son has denied his inheritance of faith and law. In its ultimate meaning, this rebellion against his spiritual inheritance is a rebellion against life itself, hence the sentence of death. He is not a weak character, he is a strong one, but his character is dedicated to evil. The family is the earthly cradle of life, and the godly family gives an inheritance of life. To renounce this inheritance is finally to renounce life. Not every rebelling son goes this far in his rebellion, but the principle of his rebellion is still a rejection of his inheritance in the full sense of that word. Eighth, as we have seen, law is a form of warfare. By law, certain acts are abolished, and the persons committing those acts either executed or brought into conformity to law. The law thus protects a certain class, the law-abiding, and every law order is in effect a subsidy to the people of the law. If the law fails to enforce that protection, it destroys itself in time. The failure of the law to execute the incorrigible and professional criminal is creating a major social crisis and leading increasingly to anarchy. In Los Angeles, California in 1968, for example, the use of city park slides by little children became difficult. Young hoodlums were burying broken bottles jagged edge up in the sand beneath the slides. Young hoodlums were involved in so many other activities that the resulting conditions were beyond the effective control of the police. Again, quote, "Use of marijuana is so vast in the Bay Area that it is simply not in the realm of possibility for law enforcement agencies to stop it. In Berkeley on a Saturday night, there may be 2,000 pot parties going on. Can you have an informer or a policeman at each one?" End quote. In virtually every area of criminal activity, the incorrigible delinquent and the professional criminal are fast gaining a greater striking power. They outnumber the police and are a vast army of dedicated lawbreakers. The courts, by making their conviction difficult, are in effect subsidizing crime and making war on the law-abiding.